Please join us for our third annual Leadership Circle Summit at Cognia's corporate headquarters in Alpharetta, Georgia, January 13th through the 15th, 2025. Learn pragmatic solutions from our expert keynote speakers, Amanda Ripley, A.J. Crabble, and Cognia's own president and CEO, Dr. Mark Elgart. Connect with other educational leaders to identify simple solutions to complex problems, share governance challenges, and establish critical professional networks that best support your work. Find out more about Cognia's Leadership Circle Summit at cognia.org or email us at leadershipcircle@cognia.org.
Ladies, gentlemen, educators, leaders, welcome to Leader Chat. I am Jeff Rose, and I am going to sound like a broken record, so excuse me or bear with me. We often talk about how we focus on topics. How do we decide on who to invite into our Leader Chat? And we actually have this organic but sometimes complicated strategy on how to do that. So often we do listen to our members and to leaders. We track trends in schools and districts and educational systems throughout the country and now actually beyond. So we have that strategy. And then at times we sometimes follow a thread. And so in this case, this may seem like it's a little self-indulgent, but this is something that I know I'm interested in, and I think you should be interested in too. And now I have been, watching and thinking about this for years, and it really has to do with virtual learning and some of our abilities, or not abilities, maybe strategies in education to provide a really high quality learning and engagement atmosphere when we're learning and communicating virtually. And I don't want educators and leaders to, think poorly of themselves. I think it's important at times we are honest. And there are exceptions to every rule, but know this. I think we have a lot to learn in education. I don't think our production value and our strategies as it relates to truly engaging on both ends, whether we are presenting or whether we are being presented to, I don't think we're stellar at it yet. But we need to be, not just because of what's current in terms of, the ability for us to communicate using technology, but more importantly, and likely what's coming. Things are going to change as it relates to how we engage students and adults to other adults. We should be good at it. If we truly believe in teaching and learning, we should embrace this and be good at it. And so the concept here is pulling on that thread and following and finding the right leader to talk to us about that. And so this is going to be an exciting conversation. I know I say that every time because it is. It is always very exciting for me, and then therefore, hopefully, it is for you too. And before we kind of dive in and I talk to you about our exciting guest, this sounds like an odd plug, but it is. And so I want to remind those that follow our Leader Chat. We appreciate you, of course, liking, sharing, and subscribing. And your comments, by the way, really help. They help us know what we maybe are doing right. And so if you have some comments for us, we do read those. Those are very important. And, we're on Apple and Spotify, Amazon. We're actually making these videos because in the past, all of the videos for the Leader Chat has been for members only. We are now post 100. We're going to start making all of those public, even our first 100 episodes. So all of our content, whether it's video and audio, is going to be publicly available. More information on that to come. But in the meantime, let me tell you about our guest, our expert in this area, and we're inviting Alicia Hughes. Alicia Hughes has over a decade serving as a virtual leader and over 14 years in the virtual space, which is going to be fun for us to talk about. She has learned what works and is ready to share. She has been responsible for consistent staff satisfaction and organizational growth during her time as a leader. She has served as a teacher, a staff leader, an assistant principal, a principal, and executive director of the largest public school in the state of South Carolina. She is the founder of Sparking Up Leadership. At Sparking Up Leadership, Alicia's mission revolves around revolutionizing the way organizations engage in virtual spaces with a focus on leadership excellence and team dynamics. She is a beacon for those seeking to navigate the complexities of remote work efficiently and effectively. Alicia's approach has turned virtual meetings from mundane to vibrant, fostering productivity and genuine connection. So without further ado, I'd love to welcome Alicia to the screen. Alicia, thank you so much for being here. How are you doing today?
I am great, and I am so excited to be here with you, Jeff. I love talking about this. I don't know if you could tell by the words I used in my mission and vision statement, but I love talking about this because I know it is such a need, as you alluded to during your introduction.
So, well, let's talk about my introduction of you. I think, from the time we talked, prepping for this conversation, I had the opportunity to learn a lot more about you, and then post that, doing some kind of sleuthing and learning more about you. So I feel like I have a pretty healthy understanding on kind of your career arc. But I think it's really important for others to know. I mean, going back to 2009, I think that's the date when you were kind of launched into this world, and that blew me away. It was 2000, when? What do you mean in 2009? And so that is something everyone needs to be aware of, because this is not something that you just started studying up, during COVID times. So walk us through what I missed in your bio, maybe going back to pre and definitely post 2009.
Yes, so you summed that up beautifully. I have been in this game long before COVID. Most people associate virtual learning with COVID, and that gives everyone that bad taste in their mouth. But I was here long before those days, in the very, very early days. I used to call it like the Wild, Wild West. We felt like pioneers just setting off on this magical adventure where we didn't know what was in store. And we were figuring things out as we were traveling through this space. And so back in 2009, no one really fully understood what I was doing, what my staff was doing, what was happening. There was a lot of misconceptions, and rightfully so, because it was so new and so fresh. And so it grew throughout the years. And then 2020 came along, and then suddenly everyone knew and understood what virtual learning was and how it was being implemented.
So, but let's talk about like these trends from 2009 to now. I mean, I have to imagine things have changed. Of course they have. If maybe you could talk about some of those things, but also potentially maybe even trends that haven't changed but need to from 2009, because one may assume, oh my gosh, well then we must have grown a great deal in this area, and maybe that's true, but maybe there's some areas that in fact we haven't. So can you talk to us about like this 2009 pre and then post, what we've learned or maybe what we haven't?
So in 2009, I would say that technology obviously was not as robust as it is today. We did not, Jeff, have this option in 2009, 10, 11, 12. We were still using good old-fashioned phones to have conferences. We would have a lot of phone calls, group calls on the phone. We were just getting into some group chats where you could text multiple people at the same time. But that was the forefront. A lot of what we were doing back in the early phase of virtual education was simply emailing and sharing documents and resources in that way. About 10 years ago, this technology became more accessible. And so we were able to have these types of meetings with multiple parties and parents and students and other staff members. And that was a game changer, a complete and total game changer, to be able to see the people that you were talking with, to be able to share ideas and thoughts and problems together in this setting. And so that truly changed the trajectory, at least at our school. But you asked what hasn't changed, and what I still see to this day, despite this accessibility, is that we are still doing things the same way we were in 2009. We are writing things, we are sharing them, and then we were getting on calls and just discussing ad nauseum. When we present, we are making very long and lengthy PowerPoints or Google Docs or maybe now Canva. So we've sparkled it up a little bit, but we are still just throwing up, screen sharing, and talking through ad nauseum with people nodding, smiling, maybe not on camera, and truly not engaging with the topic at hand. So that has not changed. So the technology is here. The possibilities are endless, and yet we are still, in a sense, doing things the way we were 15 years ago.
Why 2009 for you? Can you tell our listeners? You obviously didn't just have a dream and wake up one morning thinking, I think I'm going to do this. What was it that caused you to kind of dip your toe in and then now you're fully submerged?
Yes. So I am completely transparent when I tell this story. I had been in the brick and mortar traditional education space for 8 years, teaching middle school social studies. And then I left when I had my first child. And I thought I was going to stay home with my babies until they started kindergarten. Well, I had a son in 2007. I had a daughter in 2009. And Jeff, if you remember those years, there was a recession during that time. And my husband was in real estate. And so we had a few rough years with 2 tiny babies in our house. And he looked at me one day and said, I think you need to go back to work. And so I did a search for social studies positions and up popped a virtual teaching position. I had no idea what that was, but I knew that I was going to get a salary, that I was qualified, and that I would get to stay home with my babies. And that was it. That was the only research I did, Jeff. And so I applied, I interviewed, I had to drive to an office building, a random office building 2 hours from my home. I was like, what is this place? This is not a school. This is in an office park. Again, no idea what I was getting into, just that I needed a job and this was something that could help me with my family. Fast forward just a few months. And what started as a need and something to fill a need became this passion, Jeff, because I saw when I got in there the potential to change the lives of students and staff when done properly. I saw it. I could feel it. I believed in it. I knew there was endless possibilities. And so again, what started just as a need for me became a love and something that I believed in entirely. And that just grew and grew and grew. Thus, my entry into leadership after a very short time as a teacher at the school, and grew into me being eventually executive director. So to say I drank the Kool-Aid is an understatement.
Well, and I think, and clearly what you're doing now is spreading the word and helping others, hopefully, kind of start to take sips of this Kool-Aid as well. And, what brought me to this conversation was this word that you and I talked a lot about in preparation for this discussion was engagement. And my background in this is when I was a superintendent, we created some online, this is in air quotes for those that are just listening, these kind of online learning opportunities. And if you were to ask me why, it wasn't in preparation for a potential pandemic. It had to do with weather days, snow days. How are we going to be able to engage students and not get into the chaos of, is this a lost day? Do we add it to the end of the year? I mean, it was very pragmatic, right? The reasons why we did that. And I had no experience in terms of it trying to engage anyone in an online way or space. Right, as a superintendent, I was focused on the system and the structure in which we were going to do that, right? COVID, and all of a sudden I had started this new organization called Leading Ed, and my work now was online and engaging people in meetings and presenting. And oh my goodness, engaging people and keeping them engaged and staying engaged myself, it's still to this day, it boggles me. It boggles me on how difficult this is. You're the expert. It's exactly why I thought I need to talk to this Alicia Hughes lady. So let's talk about in engagement in terms of some of the challenges on, students, adults for that matter, and keeping people focused when they're virtually connected.
So there are more distractions right here in my little 10 by 10 office than I would ever have in a face-to-face setting, right? Because there are the home life. My dog is literally at my feet right now. So you have that. My husband could come in at any moment. We've got people walking by outside, but not only those live engagements, but then I know my laundry's right upstairs. There are dishes in my sink right now. If I am not engaged in the meeting, it is really easy to click off that camera and say, oh, I'm just going to go take care of that. Oh, I'm going to go make a quick phone call. Or I'm still going to sit here and I'm going to nod and play along, but I'm going to answer those emails that I know are piling up while I'm talking to Jeff right now. So there are more distractions that are easier to address in this space when not engaged. So that's a huge challenge in and of itself. You asked, how do we handle that?
Yeah.
You must have norms and expectations in this space. Jeff, I would not have walked in here and had my camera off and said, okay, Jeff, just let's have a conversation, but I'm going to be kind of halfway paying attention and answering you. You would not have your camera off, right? So one-on-one, we know how to act, right? We know how to act virtually. But when you start adding in a few extra people, and then it's one person doing the talking, and there are a few other people watching, it is very easy for those, if they don't feel engaged, if they don't feel like they're part of the conversation, if they don't feel like they have a voice, to disengage very quickly. And so norms and expectations set right up front are crucial. I always think about the brick and mortar setting, the school building. There are norms and expectations for staff in various ways. You know what time to arrive on campus. You know where you're supposed to go as soon as you arrive on campus. You know what you need to do at lunchtime. You know what you need to do at the end of the day before you leave. We have all sorts of norms and expectations. And yet, when we walk into this space, we forget to do those things. And so simple things like, well, you're going to have your camera on when we enter a group meeting. We are going to pause for a break at a certain time in case you do need to make a phone call, use the restroom, etc. And so we set norms and expectations that we want to adhere to in order to boost that engagement. But when you don't have those, that's when things definitely go awry.
So I have all these questions I want to ask, but I need to pause and go a little deeper on this. So it makes sense to me that when we are engaging students, norms and expectations, of course, we would do this in a classroom, right? It's a little bit easier for us to monitor. When students are sitting right in front of us, there's a desk and, you can see their feet, you can see their faces, etc. And you describe these incredible distractions when they are virtual. So yes, it makes sense. We would attempt to do that. And then, of course, watch students, of course, try to sneak around them like I would have too. Let's talk adults to adults. Because as we know, educators, I being one, yourself too as well, we have expectations for students. It doesn't necessarily mean that we abide by the expectations ourselves. Right?
Correct.
So teachers are culprits of not doing that. I would say leaders, administrators are worse at following certain protocols and strategies. So when adults are you recommending that we do this, even adults to adults in some of our meetings? I guess I'm asking this because I'm constantly presenting and talking with teams that I work with officially, some people that are, clients and members. How do we as adults create expectations for this kind of environment without feeling like we're talking down to each other? Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes total sense. And so it's twofold. First and foremost, if you are meeting with people regularly, I always say you have this conversation at the start of the meeting. If you are meeting with them once a week, once a month in this type of setting, you have an open, honest conversation to say, listen, I know there are going to be distractions. So how can we minimize them? What are some things we want to adhere to agree to, some common commitments that we can come up with to make these productive? But then as the leader of those meetings, you have to be willing to adhere to them yourself. So if one of the common commitments is we're not going to meet if it's not necessary, we're not going to hold a meeting just because it's on the calendar, you've got to be brave and strong enough to say, well, there's nothing on the calendar for this week. Let's not meet this week. Or we don't need to fill the meeting for 2 hours because we've got it on the calendar for 2 hours. And so we have to be willing to listen to those in which we are engaging with virtually, but at the same time, once we take that advice, we need to implement it and implement it consistently and regularly.
Shifting topics as it relates to virtual learning in education, first off, it's always, I always warn people, as soon as something gets tagged with an acronym, we're in trouble.
I know.
Right? Because if it becomes an acronym or becomes something that we all say all the time, it gets watered down and we get confused relative to truly what it is, right? So I may use an acronym or a specific educational lingo, and I may be talking about an apple, you may be talking about an orange, and yet we're having a conversation as though we're talking about the same thing, which is very dangerous in a lot of ways. So virtual learning. Let's talk about what virtual learning is and what it's not. And I know you have an answer for this because we talked a lot about it when we discussed this before.
Yes, I know that most people equate COVID learning to virtual learning. They think those two things are the same. And COVID learning was emergency learning. COVID learning was a quick reaction to a situation where decisions had to be made rapidly. And so, of course, in that moment, everyone was doing the best that they could, but not truly doing virtual learning. What I call that is at-home work. That is what I call what happened in most cases during COVID. Assignments were sent home. Students were expected to do them. If they had questions, they could email the teacher. Perhaps there were some Zoom calls set up. But for the most part, what happened during the pandemic was emergency learning, not virtual learning. Virtual learning is designed to replicate the experiences you would get in the traditional school. And by that, I mean engagement with teachers, not just the curriculum, not just reading, not just materials being pushed home, but true engagement with an educator. And that is that missing piece that was happening during the pandemic. You mentioned, Jeff, snow days or hurricane days that we have here in Charleston, where assignments, again, are pushed out and school leaders say things like, all right, we're going to do virtual learning today. It's the same principle. That is not virtual learning. That is, I'm giving you assignments, do the assignments at home and bring them back to me the next day or email them to me, whatever the case may be. Learning, we know as educators, is the give and take, right? Or the opportunities to engage with materials, to engage in discussions, to ask questions live. That's how the best learning occurs. And so when that happens in this space, then that is true virtual learning.
So let's talk about the leader then. So the leader, say, in a school or the district or the educational system, we've known for a long time that we expect that they are the instructional leader as well as sometimes the manager of the organization. Well, sometimes that's tricky too, right? Because that person may not have expertise in a particular topic for which they are observing that teacher in, right? So we've always had that question of, wait a minute, how does an instructional leader or say the principal who's not ever really taught, biology or chemistry, come into a biology or chemistry class and provide, some support, but also some input for the teacher who is an expert in that particular field, right? But in this case, how do we help the leader know what quality, e-learning, online learning is and what it's not, and how do they support a system that actually truly engages people like you're discussing?
Well, and to be fair, I think emergency days are okay, right? Like, I think it's if a hurricane is barreling towards Charleston and the school leader is going, oh my gosh, we have to cancel school. Let me push out some assignments. That's okay if it's a once in a while. Of course, we would love it to be like this. Of course, we would love the staff to be engaged with the students. But if it is a true emergency that we are reacting to, I still think it's okay to do the best that we can do. But when it becomes a commonality, when it becomes something that you are putting on your calendar, and here in South Carolina, we actually have e-learning days scheduled on our calendar, you have got to do that research. You have to look in and say, this is not my area of expertise by any means. No, I cannot be an expert in it all. But let me do a little research. Let me talk to some people about the best ways to plan, to prepare for these set events. And starting small with that is actually the best way. It doesn't have to be you're the expert in all things best practice virtual learning, but it can be some, again, norms and expectations that you're pushing out to your staff to say, okay, on e-learning days, you're going to teach a lesson in this way, or you're going to have a time where you're meeting with your students one-on-one. So again, doing your research when they are planned days, and then doing best practices on those days. That's where I would definitely start.
You know, I'm gonna use this word culture in my next question, and so let's make sure we define what culture is. I define culture as, and I stole this from Roland Barthes, the way we do things around here, right? Which is embedded in systems and structures, sometimes historical context, but the way we do things around here kind of defines culture. So my curiosity then is if we take this question or the past question to the next level and we think about this, I think when we talked, what's the secret sauce of trying to create a culture or a system that helps us build relationships? Building relationships while we're online. Mm-hmm. Some people, sometimes it has to do with my age, I would say it's really hard to do. Building relationships online, I'm sorry, I really have to be face-to-face with somebody. And of course, that's not the case. That's not the case at all. So how do we help systems embrace a culture and have strategies to knowing that you can build relationships, teacher to student, adult to adult, online?
Well, Jeff, despite my very youthful appearance, I am probably very close to your age. So I am not a spring chicken that is embracing every new technological advance. So let me just say that right now.
Okay, fair enough.
But I will say this with conviction and passion. I had stronger relationships with the staff at my former school, in which I was virtual for 14 years, than I ever had here in Charleston County School District. Stronger, deeper, more collaborative relationships. And I think in my case, it was twofold because, again, we were at the forefront of this and we were all in this together and we were going to build this thing and we had no choice but to work together consistently to make it great. But I know from that experience, it is about intentionality, right? So if you are in a brick and mortar setting, whether it's an office building or a school building, you are naturally going to bump into other staff members, whether it's in the parking lot or at lunch or after school. You are naturally going to have opportunities to connect and build relationships. In this little space right here, that does not happen without some planning and some intentional practices, because it's far too easy to just answer your emails, grade your papers, plan your lessons in isolation. So if you are the school leader of a virtual organization, you have got to set time to build the relationships. And that comes with, again, those norms and expectations. So for example, if you have a math department that you know needs to work together, you're going to set the expectation that you're going to meet at Fridays at 10 a.m. and Mondays at 2 p.m. And you're going to have notes that you're going to share, and you're going to have this time set where the expectation is you're going to meet and work together. But not only that, you also have to have intentional opportunities to simply engage and be with one another and get to know one another. That is crucial because culture thrives on relationships and thrives on that collaborative spirit. And so it can't just be all business. You have to provide staff with the opportunity for those, I always used to call them forced fun, so that we can really get to know each other and know each other's personalities and likes and dislikes so that you continue to build on those things when you are together in meetings for that business part of your day.
Okay, Alicia, what you just said, I have another question about. So I want to go a little bit deeper with something you just said, but I'm going to pause for a minute because we have some words from my partner in crime, our producer. And so, Chris Richard, I'm passing this to you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Chris Richard, and I'm the producer of the Leader Chat with Jeff Rose podcast, brought to you by Cognia. Just a quick reminder, if you haven't done so already, please make sure you follow or subscribe to us if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, or Podbean to make sure you're getting all the latest updates on the newest episodes. You can also check out our video episodes under our Cognia YouTube channel. Please make sure you check those out and leave us a like or a comment and let us know how we're doing. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. Back to you, Jeff.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, Alicia, let's get back to this. I'm really curious because as you're talking about this, I'm thinking about behaviors. So I like to tell people that we talk about change a lot. It's very, we go to conferences, we hear things that we're excited about and truly interested in, and then we go back and it goes to business as usual. The reason that happens, as excited as we may be in a particular topic or an initiative, if we don't change behaviors, the way we behave, then nothing changes in terms of outcome. So let's talk about these behaviors because it makes total sense. And I realize that I need to do a better job in my day-to-day creating some of those norms and structures and expectations for our online conversations and meetings. So check, now I need to think about behaviors and actually follow through with that. But behaviors in terms of engaging adults to adults. You just mentioned something when we're in a building, if we're physically together, then as we're walking down the hall, I could say, Alicia, how was your weekend? What'd you do? And I learn about you, you learn about me, and that's happening kind of at the water cooler, so to speak, right? I mean, how old school is that I just said water cooler? But how do we, when we're doing this with adults, without coming across as so antiquated, because I've done those too, where, okay, everyone, let's go around and share a quick story about yourself. What is your favorite color and animal and why? Those sometimes feel hard for me to engage in. I don't know if that's my personality, but sometimes they feel a bit antiquated and actually not real. So help us in terms of behaviors create these real engaging conversations where we're building relationships without it feeling antiquated and, excuse my term here, but cheesy.
Yeah. So I think you have to start, or I know you start small. And
Okay.
So what we did at my school was we made a requirement that when we were meeting, your webcam was on. And Jeff, oh boy, this was 10 years ago. You would have thought we asked people to get into their prom dresses and tuxedos to be on camera. I mean, the pushback from that decision was huge because, like you said, it was a change. And people don't like change. They wanted to be able to not be on camera, answering emails. They wanted to be able to not be on camera. Perhaps they were paying attention, but, in their pajamas. And so that pushback was huge. But I alluded to this from the very start. I know without a shadow of a doubt, that decision, that one decision is what changed the trajectory of our school. Because it's much harder to multitask or zone out when you are looking someone in the eyes. And so doing that small step at the beginning was a game changer. But then, like you said, some of those, we used to call them icebreakers. When you've got 20 people on a call and going around for 20 minutes talking about everybody's favorite color, that is number one, not a good use of time, but number two, leads to resentment. And so instead of those practices, which we still did from time to time, we instead found ways to create opportunities for smaller groups. And so as school leader, I used to spend at least 3 hours every week calling on different staff members, saying, let me have a 30-minute conversation with you. I want to hear what's going well. I want to hear your goals. I want to hear how I can help you. So creating those water cooler moments where I knew I wasn't going to bump into them in the virtual halls, but get to know them, their needs, how I could help. So it wasn't just tell me your favorite color, Jeff. It was tell me your favorite color, Jeff. And then how can I help you be as successful as possible here? Doing those things then created people wanting to tell everyone their favorite color at the start of the meeting, or, getting together on their own. Well, I just met with Alicia. Maybe I need to go meet with the principal today because I'd like to know more about her. And so it sort of snowballed into, this is a culture. This is a place where we care about each other, where we know each other, where we want to work together. So it was not an overnight success, Jeff. I mean, it wasn't like turn on your webcams. Oh, we're all this one big cohesive culture. No, it took time. We had to pour into it. And then it became as natural as breathing to us that this is just what we do here.
Okay, so advise me, and I'm going to just go deeper with this. And I think by advising me potentially as our listeners and watchers, it helps them as well. So I have found myself in situations where I ask people to turn their camera on. And I have felt sometimes the offense that creates, and I've said, well, listen, the reason that we need our camera on is we're going to have a conversation that if we are not engaged and proving that we're not engaged, it is going to inhibit the level of discourse. And so we need to pretend as though we're truly around a table together. And the way we're going to do that is turn our cameras on, right? And in the meantime, I see people turn their cameras on, sometimes annoyed. And then I can also watch as I am engaging them. You and I right now in this conversation, if you started answering emails, I would be able to tell, and you'd be able to tell if I was doing the same, right? But we're having this engaging conversation together because we're staring eyeball to eyeball at each other. So give me some advice on not just creating expectations, but how do I, in a conversation, a roundtable process online, also create an engaging conversation so that people just don't feel the need or the want to answer emails in the middle of it, which of course would be good instructional practices, would it not?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so help me.
Here is the question I ask when I get that question asked of me. If you have people turn on their cameras and then there's no engagement back to you, it may be time to reflect on what is the point of this meeting? Mm-hmm. Why are we meeting? Is this something that we could do in a different format? And what we learned after many years in the virtual space was if we can push things out in advance, if there is something that does not need to be done in a meeting, so whether it is here's some information that I want you to digest and then come ready to discuss or come to me with questions, we found that led to a much more engaging process than simply turn on your webcams and let me now share all this information with you. And so that is always the start that I'll ask when you're having these meetings, when you're having these engagements. Are there things that could be done prior to the meeting to allow for the meeting to be focused on discussion, collaboration, questions, concerns? The other thing is there are certainly going to be people that don't want to grab the mic, that don't want to participate for a variety of reasons. Maybe they don't feel safe. Maybe they don't feel heard. Maybe they're on the quieter side. Maybe they're more introverted. So ensuring in those meetings, you have a way to capture those voices, whether it is on a shared document where people can add their thoughts. Maybe it's gathering feedback from them prior to the conversation and using those as talking points. Or maybe, Jeff, it's the good old fashioned, hey, Alicia, what do you think about this? Just like you would do at the round table in person, if someone's being quiet, doodling on their notepad, you would call them out, right? You would say, well, what are your thoughts? I haven't heard from you all meeting. So engaging consistently is crucial in the virtual space. Again, even more so than your face-to-face opportunities, because you know all those distractions out here are pulling people away. So making sure, number one, the meeting has to be held live. And then when it does, having those opportunities and those expectations that we're going to participate together.
In preparing for this conversation, of course, you and I chatted before. I took some notes. In the meantime, I look up your stuff. I watch other videos from your TED Talk to other things that you've done, and I kind of create my curiosities based upon that. However, this question comes directly from our conversation because I took this quote down and underlined it and thought, I need to ask about this because you said to me, being engaging does not mean engagement. And so I underlined that. I said, oh, this is good. We chatted about it for a minute. So can you help and talk to leaders about what they can do to truly lead and create momentum in this kind of fast-paced time of change, and maybe make it very clear that being engaging does not mean engagement?
So leaders love to talk, right? Leaders love to be on the big stage, right, Jeff? Like that.
Yeah.
I mean,
Of course.
most leaders are not the quiet, let me just sit back and not say too much people, right? So
Yeah, sadly, but yes.
we love to be front and center. And so we might be the most engaging people in the world. And sometimes virtually, it's really almost easier to be the front and center, right? Because people are muted, off camera, doing all the things, and we're just going. So we can be engaging. But when we are not asking others for their thoughts, their opinions, their feedback, and we are just talking to our presentation that we are screen sharing or going on and on about a topic, we may be engaging, but if no one is participating, there is no engagement. And in the virtual space, it is that much harder to get that engagement because of all these distractions. And so again, going back to what I said a few minutes ago, pushing information out. If you want to talk, this is what I used to do. I love to talk. I would record myself with whatever it is I wanted to push out to staff. So whether it was a new announcement about state testing or some, graduation procedure, I would send a recording. I would talk and do all my things and get excited and have music playing and whatever I wanted to do to be engaging. But then I would ask for the engagement following that time. So whether it was a live meeting where we got together to talk about whatever I'd shared, or a form that I could push out to staff to say, tell me your thoughts on this new procedure we're proposing, to get that engagement piece, you have to have both. You have to have both. And too oftentimes, Jeff, in this space, I see lots of engaging personalities, but not getting that engagement coming back to them.
I feel like maybe you're mocking me as you're describing this. Maybe I'm the victim, and no, but this is true. In fact, so whether leaders, and let's give leaders, some kind of grace too. Whether leaders are extroverted, they have strong opinions, they appreciate being on the stage, or sometimes they're expected to be. Mm-hmm. So one dilemma in leadership is that leaders are expected to own the room. They walk in and people sometimes get kind of quiet, right? And so they look to the leader because the leader is going to give a perspective or a direction or an answer that we should be paying attention to. So it almost is this tradition of, okay, the leader's here, we will sit and listen. And what the leader does is they rise to the occasion by meeting that expectation and therefore talking. Correct. That doesn't mean people are engaged, to your point. So I want our audience to be very clear that being engaging does not mean engagement. And it's a wonderful quote that came from you, and I'm gonna use it. I'm gonna steal it, and I want to thank you for that. Now, just like AI, that a leader may not know how to integrate this into their repertoire, their instruction, their strategies, their system. Well, the same with this, right? This e-learning, this virtual learning and engagement, they may not feel comfortable. And so what sometimes we do is we avoid it, we deny it, and we engage in what we're comfortable with. But eventually, these trends are going to knock the door down.
Correct.
And you can either embrace it or it will be embraced for you.
Perfect.
So help the hesitant leader. So the leader that, there's this demand or the demand is going to come. What advice do you have for that leader to equip themselves so that they can continue to lead and lead well?
And you hit the nail right on the head there. We all engage virtually. Even if we are the principal of a brick and mortar school or, working in your space, we all engage virtually. We're sending emails to families. We are hosting these calls with perhaps people at the district or in other school buildings. And so we all are engaging virtually. And so listening to best practice and trying it in small doses at first to say, I was listening to Alicia on that leader chat and she said something about how she pushed out a video to her staff. Maybe I'll try that one and see how it's received. Or asking everyone, like you said, to turn on their webcams, or simple things to start to embrace your learning. That's kind of how you said AI. That's kind of how I've been approaching AI. I am not an expert there, but like you said, I know it's coming and I know the possibilities and the potential that it has to change lives. And so I'm just dipping my toe in, trying to learn new things here and there when I have a few moments, trying something out. And then if I don't like it or don't like the way it turned out, saying, okay, let me try something different. So really embracing the trends, the best practices, picking things up along the way, and then implementing them. Just like with all learning, right? Just like with all learning that we do. We try it, we implement it, we tweak it, we reflect. It's the same here.
Well, Alicia, you'd be happy to know that we believe in the Leadership Circle, our model of engaging and supporting leaders is through discourse. In fact, 90% of our processes are roundtable. We say circles are better than rows. Even when we have a summit or an event and we're together face to face, we run a 15-85 model, we call it, where we only talk at 15% of the time. 85% of the time, we know, and we know this through, quality pedagogy and strategies, is that people need to be active participants in learning as opposed to passive, and therefore we believe in engaging. This leader chat thing that we do is the one thing that we do, which is we push out content. You and I are definitely engaging with each other, and then of course we push this out for people to listen or to watch. So this is the thing we ask all of our guests in the end of the conversation. If you and I were to pretend we're at this table and around the table with us are principals, superintendents, and every other position in between, it doesn't have to be public, it can be charter, independent, etc., educational leaders, and we've had this engaging discussion that's gone beyond just you and I, you have 30 seconds and you want to have this kind of drop the mic a moment on, here are my final words of wisdom for you. What would you want to leave them with? Ready, go.
This space has so much potential for students and for staff. There are so many opportunities waiting to transform education that we cannot ignore, that we cannot be afraid of. But what is the most important thing to know is this is different than your traditional brick and mortar setting. So what is working in the school building needs to be tweaked and modified to work here. And that comes by doing what you do in the brick and mortar, building those relationships, building culture, allowing opportunities for engagement, and setting norms and expectations. It looks different. It feels different, but doing that will allow your school and your staff to embrace these possibilities that are out there to truly change the lives of students and staff.
Alicia, I feel in this conversation, in a way, I feel a bit guilty, like it's self-indulgent, but I also hope by learning from you and with you, then that gets passed on to people who are listening and watching. I think what you're doing is not just relevant, but I think it will continue to be more so over time. I think that post-COVID, we had this yearning on let's get back.
Yeah.
And let's swing back to, and once again, air quotes, traditional practices, things that we're comfortable with. That being said, I think in the future, we're going to see more and more, as it's happening in the workforce, will transition to students, and we are going to see more opportunities that need to be embraced as it relates to engaging people online. And your work is just so meaningful because we don't necessarily know how to do that well. We need people who do, such as yourself. And we're so thankful that you came here today.
Well, thank you. It has been my pleasure to be here. As you can tell, yes, I am so passionate about this, and I am just excited to share my knowledge. So thank you, Jeff, for having me. This was great.
Yeah, we're excited to pass it on. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I know that this is hard. It's actually why we wanted to have this conversation with an expert like Alicia. We need to sometimes get out of our comfort zone and start to learn, as opposed to just, kind of ride this kind of momentum of what e-learning and engagement looks like without knowing how to do it. We need to change our behaviors. I need to change my behaviors. So I have to assume that you learned from some things today from Alicia, like I did. Ladies and gentlemen, educators, leaders, thank you so much for the noble work you do. Be well.